Welcome to Sell the Greatness podcast with Victor Arocho. And I have my great friend, mentor, fellow entrepreneur, Steve Running on the line. Steve, he's got a tremendous background and he's been an entrepreneur since, 30, 40 years, Steve?
Since the beginning of the 80s, 1982.
Awesome. Peak performing sales professionals use motivational ebooks with audio, music, videos, and more, right? And this is to keep them energized. This is to keep them focused. But I wanted to ask you a question, right? Predicated on everything that you've learned and studied and you've taught and trained. My question is, why do you feel that people need these motivational ebooks, audios, learning, and videos in their lives? How does it affect them?
Well, that's not a simple question. It's got a complex answer. All right, because there are a lot of things that videos, audios, any kind of media do. All right, but most people think that they're done learning when they graduate high school, graduate college, wherever it is, and that's it. They never pick up another book. They don't go to seminars, etc. And I'll tell you, most people start off unconsciously incompetent. And by that I mean they don't even know what they don't know. Some people, some percentage, become consciously incompetent. They say, holy shit, I didn't really learn that much at college after all. Or worse yet, what they taught me in college was all wrong. Right? Now, some people get stuck there. They just say, oh, well, and they get stuck in a rut and they hit X level because of that. Some people say, oh, well, obviously I've got a lot more to learn, and they become consciously competent. That means they figured out what they don't know, they learned about it, and they execute it and develop skills. And ultimately, you become unconsciously competent. So sometimes I'll advise a young person on the floor, oh, wait, don't do it that way, do it this way. And they'll go, why? And I go, I don't know, just trust me, that's the way to do it. And I have to stop and think for 10 minutes to think of why that's the right way. That's why I know it's the right way. It works. I can prove it works. But now I got to think about, well, why? So I'm totally unconscious because it's become so reflexive. Now, Victor, you like to use sports analogies. So maybe I could use one. I was a racquetball player for a long time till I destroyed my knees. Then I played golf. And like all other sports, and when I was young, I played basketball. There's a point where you watch people play, and then you go to do it. Heck, the first time I swung a golf club at a golf ball, I missed the ball. Then I swung again, I missed the ball again. It looks real easy. And then somebody explains to you, well, you got to keep this arm straight, you got to keep your feet this way, and so on. And you start to say, oh, well, I didn't know that. Well, there you go, unconscious incompetence. You didn't know what you didn't know. Now you know. I got to keep this straight. I got to pull back this way. I got to swing through, follow through. And I got to keep my head looking at the ball, otherwise I'm going to miss it. And you do it the first time, and boy, you hit that ball. The only thing is that ball starts heading out straight, and then it makes a boomerang right or a boomerang left, which we call hooks and slices in the golf world. And you learn some more. And look, if you just go out a couple times and play and don't get a lot of information, you're not going to be shooting par or anything close. You're not even going to be shooting under 100. What happens is you go out and you practice and you get advice, and then you practice from the ice and the advice and you drill. Well, that same way you learn a sport is the same way you learn and get better at a profession. You go and you get advice, whether you get it from a book, from a video, an audio, somebody, a mentor that talks to you, somebody you observe. You say, oh, that looks like a pretty good technique. I could have used that the last time I blew a deal. Let me try it next time. And you drill. You practice. And you practice a technique till you get it down. And then you say, all right, I'm a little bit better. And then you go find another technique, whether you hear it on a tape, whatever media, and you go and you practice it. You add that to your toolbox and so on. And what you really discover, or what you'll be doing, is something called incremental improvement. Now, if you read a lot of business books, or go to a lot of business seminars, or read a lot of or listen to a lot of business audios, you'll discover that there's a Japanese word, I think it's kaizen, for a theory of incremental improvement. Wow, look at that. You discovered it on your own. You just learn a little bit at a time. You get better and better. Next thing you know, you're twice as good, 4 times as good, 8 times as good, 16 times as good as you started. All right. That's a small percentage of people. You've heard the term 1%ers and 10%ers. Those are the people who are the wealthiest people in America. Why are they that? Because they didn't stop learning the day they got out of school. They kept on learning. You can't show me a person who's a 10%er, who's got a net worth over $1 million, who didn't continue learning. You know, when you go look at those 500, 700, 800 million, $2 million houses, I happen to live in a 7,000 square foot house on 7 acres, but all those houses have this room called the library. You go look at at one of those little $200,000 houses, they don't have a room called the library. Does that tell you something? Maybe there's a correlation there. All right. So that's the side of educational part of media. But let's understand that you have 2 brains. All right. So we're talking about educating, getting better, going from unconsciously incompetent to consciously incompetent to consciously competent to unconsciously competent. But that's the big brain, the human, the part that makes us humans. Okay, you have 2 brains. You have your cerebral cortex, but then you have your reptilian brain. That's the brain, the smaller part of your brain that's left over from when we were different animals, before we became humans. That's the part that generates your emotions. That's the part that generates your drives. That part of the brain reacts to different things. It reacts to flight or fight. It reacts to music. It reacts to colors. It reacts to beauty. It reacts to green, because green means there's stuff growing. All right, and that means there might be food there. This is the little primal part of your brain, and that gets tapped into also by audio and video, especially audio and video. All right, consequently, we've all felt it. There's certain days you feel really up and excited about something. All right, now I could use some examples. They'd probably, because of the kind of person I am, they'd be off color. So I won't use those things. But you have to think about whatever it is that excites you. Maybe you have a hard time getting up every day for work, but tomorrow you're going to be taking a canoe trip, and it's Saturday. And goddamn, you're up at 5:30, ready to get out there and go on the canoe trip because you love canoeing. Whatever your thing is, you'll know certain days you're really excited and you get up early in the morning. Other days you're not. Well, that's your primal brain. That's not your big human brain. That's the part that creates the drive inside of you. And each of us, if we really want to excel, we have to figure out what drives us. What is the inside thing? Because we're all different. And the drive for each person comes from something else. The drive might be to spend a lot of time with your kids and do things with your kids. Your drive might come from I don't know, eating at great restaurants and eating lots of different foods. That might be what excites you. What might excite you is playing a competitive game of tennis. What might excite you is just beating somebody in something strategic, like beating somebody for a sale or your competitor. I don't know where your drive is going to come from, but every person is driven for different reasons, different ways. But that drive comes from your reptilian brain. And the great thing is that your big brain can fool your reptilian brain, because it's got a thing called imagination. And Your little brain doesn't know the difference between something that's vividly imagined or something that's real. Now, this might sound like a complex concept, and you might say, well, I don't know if that's true. I'm going to prove it to you right now, because I doubt that there's anybody who's listening to this podcast who hasn't sat and watched a movie that made them cry, that made them jump, that made them have nightmares the next night. Okay, in all those cases, you're looking at dots on a flat screen. It's nothing real. Yet, because it's so well done, your brain interprets it as reality, and it will actually make you emotionally sick. It'll make you emotionally cry. It'll make you emotionally happy. It'll make you laugh hysterically. So, just by getting information that your big brain interprets a certain way, it makes your reptilian brain drive you. And that drive is very important, because if you can figure out how to feed through your big brain the right images, the right vision, and the right beliefs, and beliefs are another set of things that are very important. The right stuff, well, then you can wake up every day excited. As a matter of fact, you might be like some people say Donald Trump only sleeps 4 hours a night. I suspect he's really excited every day about all the stuff he's got to do, and therefore he doesn't even want to sleep. Biologically, we have to, but there are people who sleep very, very little amount of time because they just have so much excitement. Their reptilian brain is so ready to do things. And why does that happen? Because they feed the right stuff to their reptilian brain. All right. The third thing, and this is going to be the last category of information I'm going to talk about, is that, and I briefly mentioned, I said their belief system. Look, there are a couple sets of beliefs, things that we're taught by our peers, our parents, the environment we grew up in, that if you have one set, you are not going to succeed in much of anything. And if you have the other set, you're going to succeed. And not only that, they have a continuum. One is at the, I'll call low extreme, and one is at the high extreme. If you have an internal locus, that's spelled with an L, L-O-C-U-S, an internal locus of control, the higher and more powerful your internal locus of control is, the more successful you're going to be. If you have an external locus of control, the less successful you're going to be. And here's what a locus of control means. It's whether you believe that you control what's going to happen to you, or do you believe that your environment and the people around you and somebody else controls, okay, what's going to happen to you. An internal locus of control means you control it. You look at a rainy day and you say, it's going to be a rainy day. I'm going to pick something different to do, or I'm going to deal with the rain in such a way. Or you can just say, oh, it's a rainy day. This is terrible. I'm going to have to sit home and not do anything. Okay, external locus of control. All right. To continue with that, you can be an optimist or a pessimist. Right? You can look at life and just say, the universe is a fantastic place, and it's looking out for me, and there's abundance out there, and I'm going to take advantage of it. Or you can look at everything that's wrong with the universe. You can think scarcity and think, oh, there's barely enough for everybody. I got to get my fair share. Okay, and you can have that attitude. Look, optimists or abundance thinkers, and maybe they're two different things, but they're very related. If you're an abundance thinker, if you're an optimist, you're going to have visions that are going to lead you to do things that are going to make you more successful. If you're a pessimist or you're a scarcity thinker, you're going to do less. The next thing is, and possibly it leads to both this internal locus of control, optimist, abundance thing, is that we, as people, we become what we think about. Whatever we envision our future, that's what we get. There's an old book, and there's a guy in it named Solomon, and he said, without vision, the people will perish. Okay? So I'm going to suggest to you that old saying from that old book has merit today, because if you imagine a great future, if you imagine a great career in sales, if you imagine a great career in being a football player, if you imagine a great career being a medical doctor, if you imagine being a great housewife, if you imagine being a great house husband, okay, I believe that you have better chances of accomplishing that than if you imagine how difficult it is or how impossible it is to be those things. And it's interesting because there's Newtonian physics and there's quantum physics. And interestingly, even the quantum physicists are discovering that a person's thoughts actually affect the results of experiments when you get to the quantum level. Einstein called it spooky, okay? But it suggests that even the smartest scientists are discovering that our thoughts, okay, actually can mold reality. And we're talking at the quantum level. I don't know what else they're going to discover about that, but I'm going to suggest that your vision, what you imagine your future to be, is where you're going to be headed. So having a positive vision is really important. And I think lastly, in the belief systems, an important belief to have is that there are consequences to your behavior. And this might fall under the internal locus of control. Some people believe that there's a cause and effect. My actions, my thoughts lead to my consequences. And there are a bunch of people walk around the planet and don't believe that their thoughts and their choices and their actions lead to consequences. My experience is what you think, what you do, what you believe is going to affect the results that you get from this planet and this universe. All right. On that note, I'm done with my dissertation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
In the conversation we just had for 10, 15 minutes, you brought up a lot of topics right? You brought up belief systems. You brought up that successful people, successful sales professional, believe in abundance. There's enough for everyone. So pretty much you encapsulated quite a few of the theorems that you taught me and that you teach your teams. You've given phenomenal stuff. But the learning, this is where I've seen in my company as a leading sales development company, quick and easy. We work with growth-minded CEOs, entrepreneurs, owners, sales professionals who are frustrated because their revenues aren't growing as fast as they want them to, and they need clarity to what's bottleneck. But the challenge is now we take on a client, we analyze, and part of it is the development and consistent development of learning with their sales leaders and their sales people. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
So what I found is amazingly is that your comment early on that people either get out of high school or they get out of college, all of a sudden they stop learning. And that is the biggest challenge in helping. And I'm in this because I love sales. I love the passion. I've had 4 or 5 companies. We started the insurance company. We raised 16 million. A lot of that was you gave me that confidence and that push, and said, Vic, stop making so much money for everyone else. Go make it yourself. But what I'm finding is that, first of all, we have statistics and data on over 1.8 million sales leaders and people that have been evaluated. And what it shows is that there's only 26% of salespeople outside of retail that are good, and 4% are elite. What are your thoughts on that piece? Now, that's what the data shows. I just wanted to see if you feel that's around the right area.
I would that sounds like that sounds accurate. Look, we live in a country of abundance. Only 10% of the households in this country are worth $3 million or more.
This is disgusting to me. only 7% of individuals in the United States make over $100,000. Now, we could talk about millions and so forth, but only 7%. Now, Steve, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure, as my mentor and learning from you, I am to believe that if you are in the profession of sales, and it is a profession, you can make as much as doctors, attorneys, that if you're not making over 100,000, and I really believe minimum 150,000 or more, something is wrong.
I guess it depends on what you're selling. All right. So
outside of retail,
I tell you what, this is what I would agree with, that if you haven't invested 25 years of your life in education and practice like a surgeon has, or like an MBA executive has, to get to the point to make six figures, the next and simplest and fastest and easiest way to make six figures, and high six figures, maybe even seven figures, is sales. And perhaps, I don't know statistically now, but I do know at one time, 30, 40 years ago, the highest earners were salespeople. And as a matter of fact, for a time there, the 50s and 60s and 70s, and I don't know what the new numbers are, but the CEOs of most of the Fortune 500 companies came out of sales. They didn't come out of finance. Nowadays, it might be a higher percentage they come out of finance because we have all kinds of ways that you can play with money. But sales and marketing was where all the top millionaire executives came out of, and the millionaire earners that weren't executives were salespeople. What the stats are today, I don't know, but it'd be interesting, perhaps for your company, to do some research on that. So yeah, I can say that the highest paid profession, one of the highest paid professions, are people in sales and marketing. Do all salespeople? No, it's a small percentage. But there's a thing called the Pareto principle. It was written about by an economist back in the time of the Borgias and the Medicis, I believe. And what he realized was that typically, 20% of the people do 80% of the production, and 20% of the people earn 80% of the income, and 20% of the people pay 80% of the taxes, and so on. Look, there's a natural pecking order that seems to occur naturally within human cultures, and there are the 10 percenters, the more elite, the high earners, and then there are the people who end up always having to work to pay, to have a roof over their head and to feed themselves and their families. Not all people are like that. All right, everybody doesn't have to work. Right now, I could stop working. I work because I love to work, but right now, I have enough wealth accumulated that I could live in my house, I could feed my family, and I could take cruises 3 times a year, and not go to the office, not do any work. It's possible. I reached that point at a fairly young age. There are a lot of people who don't even believe that's possible. I'm sure there are a lot of people who would listen to this and say, "Oh, Steve's fibbing." Well, no, there's a bunch of us, 10% of the U.S. population, maybe a little smaller, who actually become self-sufficient, right? Wealthy enough where we don't have to work, all right? And it's not because there is we take an unfair share of a limited pie. The pie, we are the people who grow the pie. We grow the pie. It's that a lot of other people don't participate. And consequently, and in this country, it's amazing. It's amazing. You can get I have a friend who owns a business who came from Vietnam at the end of the Vietnam War, and he couldn't speak really good English, and started a business from scratch, and he's got to be worth about $20 million right now. Yet I know people that I grew up with in Perth Amboy got an excellent education. They've got college degrees. They speak the language. They knew the culture, and they're broke today. They still have mortgages on their house. They're 60 years old. Okay, they're in debt. They have nothing saved up for retirement. How does that happen? Well, I can tell you how it happens. Right? There's different belief systems, different attitudes, different drives, and different attitudes towards learning. And you know, you've already hit on it. All right. You know, I'll tell you something, Victor. A lot of people, you know, we live in a society. We live in a society where it's a kind of there's a winner take all success image. All right, and people look at movie stars and say, "Oh, those are the rich people." Well, there's a book that was written called "The Millionaire Next Door." It's written by a guy named Danko and another professor, and it's an empirical study. And most millionaires in this country, you wouldn't even know they were millionaires. The majority, 90% of the millionaires in this country, are people that they're not driving fancy cars. They don't have. They're not living in castles and so on. And so a lot of people target, and they read these magazines and they think that they got to be Bruce Willis. You don't. I'm going to tell you the name of a person. Ana Maria Marcondes Bendito Santa Ana. Do you know her?
I'm not sure if I know her, but I do know that being Latin, we have very long names.
Yeah. Well, okay. She's in 1,000th place. Not first place, not second place, not third place, not fourth place, not fifth place. She's in 1,000th. Now, what list of 1,000th is she? The 1,000th richest people in the world on LinkedIn this morning. Okay, she's worth $1.8 billion, and you don't even know her name. And let me tell you, $1.8 billion, when you have that kind of money, that's not money that you spend like a person who makes $100,000 a year. A person who makes $100,000 a year, every week, okay, they're wondering what bills they're going to be paying. And boy, could I buy that little sailboat for my kid? How much? What will I have to cut back on? Okay, that's what happens when you live at one level. When you get to another level, where you hear about these very wealthy people, and we could go even further down from 1,000, because 1.8 billion is a lot of money. They don't monetize that. They don't. Most of that is is in the form of companies and organizations that employ other people and create those $100,000 a year jobs. I mean, I heard this week that Jeff Bezos is worth $125 billion, and people say, well, he should give some of that away. He doesn't have that in his checkbook. That's the worth of the company he runs that employs 50,000 people that are making 100,000, 75,000, and 30,000 a year, whatever level they're at. Okay, and that company has that worth. It's not like it's in his checkbook and he's spending it next Saturday, you know, on stuff. People, there's wealth. The wealth attitude, understanding money. Once you get beyond a certain point, it goes from thinking profit and loss or cash flow to balance sheet thinking. There's a great book. I think the guy's name is Kiyosaki or something like that. He wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Another great book. Every school kid should have to read that book so that they understand really what money's about and how it works. But in this country, if you don't live beyond your means, if you keep getting smarter, it's so easy to not only pay yourself well, but then to save it, invest it, and create more wealth. Wealth that benefits our society. So part of the reason I got onto this point is because sometimes our society focuses on just that you got to be the absolute top, and I'm saying, yeah, you don't have to be the absolute top. You have to get skillful at something and bring value to other people.
On that point, right, on people that have to
Yep.
be the top, would you agree the problem with that type of thinking is they end up giving up because they're trying to be that music mogul. They're trying to be Jeff Bezos. They're trying to be, and that's where that's where I've seen the challenge. I mean, shoot for the stars. Don't get me wrong, but don't give up because you can't be the next billionaire, right? And I could tell you from personal experience in running different companies, I know that if a person gets to $250,000 to $300,000 in personal earnings a year, they're living a pretty good life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They're living in the top 10% of our society, maybe the top 5%. I mean, they're living well. And look, sometimes, I think it's Shaquille O'Neal. It has a program that he's done, and he did it because he discovered how many professional football players who had big contracts ended up being poor. Now, my stepfather was a guy named Jack Stroud, who was a fairly famous football player in his time. As a matter of fact, he played in the 1959 Colts-Giants game that put NFL on television. So that was the first really famous NFL championship game, and after that, football really took off in this country. But and he was a pretty famous player for his time. He did okay, but his wealth didn't grow the way it could have if he had understood money, if he had understood wealth, if he had understood the place of society. And I think later, when big bucks came into the sport, a lot of these players, they went out and bought 6 Ferraris and this giant house and that giant house, and they I don't know, invested in a restaurant that they weren't running. If there's any business where people can steal more money from you, I don't know what it is. It's the restaurant business. Okay, so and then you discover that they have nothing. Well, Shaquille O'Neal gets out there now. He's got a great program for these people to say, look, okay, being rich is not necessarily about having 5 Ferraris. That's what you were focused on, and maybe that's what drove you. But now it's time to manage your wealth properly. And the great thing about money, once you have it, you can use it to make more money. People will pay to borrow your money to start a business, and they will give you a percentage of that business, which then you could save that money and invest in something else. And not only that, when you invest it, okay, what you do is you create jobs for other people. You create jobs for kids and so on, and so you become part of the economy. And isn't that a lot better than a Ferrari? Which, trust me, I had a Ferrari. Okay, after 2 weeks of driving it, it's just another car. All right.
That's what happened. That's what happened with my Porsche, and then what happened was I was lucky I was able to have it for a couple of years because we always had a car and a SUV, but I got the Porsche, and then when I coached basketball, my wife started getting upset after a while because she could drive stick, thank God, so she could drive the Porsche with my daughter, but they couldn't bring any friends in. So eventually I had to trade the Porsche back in. But you're right, it's just another car. There's just so much great stuff you have here. Let me just tell you something pretty funny to lighten this up a little bit about Shaquille O'Neal. Chris Rock, the comedian, are you familiar with him?
Yep.
Okay, well, he's got a skit on that, Shaquille, this was a while ago, Shaquille O'Neal signed, I don't know, $100 million contract with the Lakers or whatever, and everyone's going, man, Shaquille O'Neal is wealthy, and Chris Rock is, Shaquille, that's a lot of money, there's no doubt, but he's not wealthy, he's rich, but he's not wealthy. He goes, the guy that signs his check, now he's wealthy. I just thought that was. I just wanted to bring a light to that because you brought up Shaquille O'Neal, but that's a fact.
It's all relative.
Yeah, Ray Allen wrote something in I forgot what magazine. It was either Success or so forth. There was like 40 to 60% like anywhere from between 5, 7, and 10 years of NBA players are either bankrupt or broke after leaving the league. My biggest thing is, like when you mentioned the millionaire next door, my biggest challenge is, and I've been lecturing at universities as a lab lecturer, and is that, you know, every examples they're giving these students and these kids are all these multi-billionaires. And with all due respect, you got to give them credit. But again, it goes back to, Steve, you could be, you know, the 8,000th person and doing well. It goes back to making $250,000 to $300,000 of your income. Even if it's gross, you'll be living well. So there's that gap in between of you know, these guys were innovative. I mean, you know, I don't think there's going to be another Steve Jobs.
They were lucky. Look,
you know,
you have to be smart, but you have to be in the right place at the right time. And the few that become billionaires, it's not just their skill. They are not 1,000 times smarter or 1,000 times harder working than their competitors. And look, there were 1,000 guys doing with the same idea that Zuckerberg had. Okay, and they were all doing the same thing. His timing was just right. He happened to meet the right investors. He happened to make a few good decisions, and he was the guy, okay, who won the game. All right, but the fact of the matter is, it wasn't because he was that much better or smarter than the other guys. Now, by the way, if opportunity knocks and you're not prepared to handle it, all right, if you call on a great customer and the customer has a need and your product would fill it, but you don't know how to communicate your presentation in a way that the customer would understand, all right, well, then, boom, you're not going to do the sale. Okay, that's not luck, all right? That's, you weren't prepared. So you have to be prepared. And so I don't want to take away from these people. They were prepared. They were prepared better than 99% of the people are. All right. But there's a big quantity of individuals up in that 1% that maybe, or the 10% that just didn't have the right opportunity at the right time. And so they didn't make the billion this time. But I'll tell you another thing about people with money, because I've known, and I've been wealthy and I've lost it all and made it again. There are lots of people that I know that, okay, have made a lot of money, lost it. As a matter of fact, one of the EO members here, McAllowitz, he's got a book out called The Pumpkin Plan. Great book. He's got a couple other things. I believe he made a lot of money, lost it, and then went back and made it again. Once you know how to do it, if you're smart, if you learn, all right, you can do it again and you can do it again. So it is a formula. You just have to learn the formula. But you're not going to learn the formula if you don't go out and talk to these people. If you don't believe you have more to learn, all right, you're just going to be the package that you are. And society pays you for the package that you are. And if you're making $50,000 a year right now, it's because you're a $50,000 package. If you teach yourself to be a $100,000 package, you'll make $100,000. If you teach yourself to be a $200,000 package, you'll be a $200,000. I think at some point there's a diminishing return. I think you start making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. Okay, at some point luck starts factoring in. But you know, and these guys who make these billion, you know, 125 billion, that's a big chunk of that is right place, right time.
Excuse me, but Steve, you taught me a long time ago that luck is being in the right place at the right time. But what you really taught was being in as many places at as many times as possible. And when it goes back to preparation, you know, because I don't think it's luck, Steve. I don't really believe it's luck. I mean, we could have a different opinion there. I just think it's more what you said, right? So when you start making your money and then you have the opportunity to invest in a business and get an equity part of the money, that's not necessarily luck. You were prepared financially. In the millionaire next door, it was all about being conservative, but having money to take action when you would get a great return on investment. So that's, you know, for me, it isn't luck. It's being smart. The other thing is with the Zuckerbergs and there's a combination. It could be. I just look at it as opportunity, right? Opportunity will come to you, and especially if your heart is intent on helping others. But this all, I just want to circle back around, particularly in this series, in this segment, regarding it's all about your ability to not stop, to continue learning, right? That you don't know it all. You can't imagine, just my company alone has assessed over 5,000. And you'll be amazed of how the reaction is of these salespeople, that they don't believe that that's how their thought process is. Now, some of it's really not their fault. It depends on where they were brought up. It depends on how they were raised. It depends on what they read. Like, for example, how much sales training do you provide, or not you, does your company provide for its people?
We provide a lot. People train every day. We
every
have
single day,
8:15 to 9 o'clock. We have a training
Beautiful.
period.
Right.
Now, sometimes they train at other times. So, for example, and we do a lot of case studies, which means we look at a situation that a person had and how they handled it, and then we dissect it and we talk about people who had other situations that handled it differently, and what their results were, and so on. But we also do standard operating procedure training. We do sales training. We do, because we service industries, we train on industries. So we have a lot of different varieties of training, and we also have exams. If you want to end up owning stock in our company, you have to pass 12 sets of exams. So you have to prove that you've become consciously competent in a certain set of items.
Awesome. So it goes back to the continuous learning. So in the people that we have, we're coaching and training, and we have an awesome curriculum it's blended learning, it's embedded learning, it's on the go. But you'd be amazed of how people just kind of feel like it's taking up their time. They don't have time to do this. But they want these other things. They have what's called, like we agree on, is conflicting goals. Bottom line is, a lot of good stuff again, is your ability to keep going and going forward, to learn and to help others and to solve problems for people, right? It's ridiculous how much companies spend in training. And the sad part is they train the frontline sales manager the least, and he has or she has the highest impact on the salespeople. They don't teach them that.
Well, I'll tell you, and I think we've talked about this. One of the mistakes that a lot of company owners, especially mid-sized and small company owners, do is they promote their best salesman to be the sales manager, and the qualities that make you a great salesperson are not what make you a great sales manager.
Exactly.
Well, I could talk for an hour about, or you could talk about an hour, what makes a great sales manager, and maybe we could do one of these talks about that subject at some point.
Well, I'm going to leave you with this statistic that we got from one of the, and this came from Kennesaw State. 80% of marketing majors begin their career in sales, right? Similar percentages of other business-related majors. This came from Bristow, Amex, and Slacks in 2006. Greater than 50% of finance majors begin their careers in sales. Again, from the same Bristow, Amex, and Slack in 2006. 60 to 90% of majors, business majors, go into sales, right? That's from Kennesaw as well. 30% of job offers are to undergraduates. Now, remember what you said about, there's two statistics that I found that were really good. I'm going to give it to you at the end. Greater than 50% of all college graduates enter sales as their first position. Less than 40% of colleges in the nation teach a course in professional selling. That's out of 4,000 universities. Approximately 50 universities have one sale. But the sad part is 60% of the graduates that end up going into sales leave their position in 1 year. So it goes back to that we're not preparing. They still see sales as this bad shyster, snake oil salesperson. When those days are over, you shouldn't recognize those people right off the bat. And then the students that have degrees in professional selling, and Baylor's one of the top ones, Stetson University, which I have an affiliate to. It has a great program, a Centurion sales program. You know, students with a degree in professional sales are given 25 to 30% higher starting incomes than the others with most degrees, right? And then I found that CEOs that are sales oriented, their companies outgrow their competitors by 20 to 25%. So it goes back to what we were saying, that the CEOs like IBM, you couldn't get to CEO unless you started in sales, right? So again, it goes back to that people in the profession of sales need to understand they should keep learning. They should find a mentor. They should mentor someone. And, you know, I've been blessed to have you as a mentor. And, you know, I don't want to get some I guess I could get myself a shout out from you here. But, you know, how many times have you asked me or suggested a book, and how fast did I read it and turn around and call you?
Well, good, because I'm going to suggest a book for you.
No, but I'm answer the question first.
I don't know how fast you read it because I'm not watching you, but I do. I do know. I
got to get you. I do know I call you
read
right
the
away.
book. Yes, you do. Okay, that's why when you read Success and Luck by Robert H. Frank, I'm going to expect a call back soon. And here's another thing, okay? Because I want to. This is an hour-long subject. Maybe it'll be our next podcast, because everybody is always selling. Most people just don't realize they're always selling. When I go home tonight, my wife and I are going to talk about what we're going to do this evening, and she's going to sell me on her opinion, and I'm going to sell her on mine, okay? And one of us is going to close successfully, and the other one is not. Or maybe we'll have a win-win close. There's a concept for you. Okay, win-win selling. All right, so you're always selling. All right, when you and your friends are talking about doing things, you're selling. Okay, if anytime you're trying to persuade anybody of anything, and you'll find yourself all day long trying to persuade somebody of something. You're trying to persuade your child to behave in a certain way. You're trying to persuade your friends to do something. You're trying to persuade a person to go out on a date with you. You're trying to persuade someone to give you a good deal on something you're trying to buy. We're always selling. It's just a process of persuasion. But that's a whole other subject that we should get to another time. And I'll tell you, successful people, the people who not only the people who are wealthy enough, because there's other measurements of success, but the people who have the healthiest most functional families and relationships with their kids, the people who live longest, okay, the people who stay physically fit the best, okay, the people who are who have lots of friends and support in the community. All those people who do best in those criteria are successful. You're going to discover all of them are great salespeople. All right, and there's specific rules, there's specific fundamentals that we can, if we analyze it, that we can discover. All right, make them great persuaders. But read our book. Okay, and some of them are in there. A lot of them are in there. Anyway, it's 12:30. We've been doing this for an hour, and I got to go to my next item, man.
No. Let's wrap this up. So again, Steve, I appreciate your time, your wealth of knowledge you've given us. Again, Deidre Murray, real quick, is what are your key target areas? Just give us like 3 or 4 so our people know, and they can, and how could they reach you? You have an 800 number, correct?
Scientists, engineers, medical doctors that work for drug companies, not clinical, and quants, people who do analytical math. And
you help them find top talent in those fields.
In those areas, yep.
Right.
If somebody wants, I'll tell you what, if one of your clients wants to acquire any kind of talent, now it may not be in our sector, and I may say, look, love to have your business, but we're not the appropriate people because that's not what we specialize in. I'll send them someplace else, but I'll tell them who that they should talk to, or I'll explain to them the model of what strategy and what execution and what tools are available to them to fill those positions if it's not something that we go after. Or maybe I'll discover it's a market we're not after, and I'll hire 4 more people and I'll go after that market. Who knows?
I got it. What's your 800 number, Steve?
We don't have an 800 number. Our number is 609-584-9000, extension 202. If you can't afford to make that call, you shouldn't be our client.
That's awesome. Extension 202, will that get to someone that they can get directed to? Because I don't want to get you bombarded.
You know, I don't even know why they have 800. Nobody charges for phone calls anymore. Is there such a thing? If people get charged for phone calls?
That's awesome. Listen, these are the action items we have in the book on this section. That we have, that self-motivation ebooks, and this is what we listen to. And I just want to make sure I like leave people with actions. You know, here's the action items. Create a playlist for all aspects of your sales cycle. What does that mean? Find the music that gets you going for whatever activity you need to do for that particular day, whether it's prospecting, closing, managing pipeline, going after pipeline. So 1, create a playlist and get your music on. Get prepared for the game. 2, keep your spirits high and read something motivational and inspirational. 3, listen to an audiobook and never stop learning.
I think those are great ideas, great points.
Greatness is being world-class. Sell the greatness. This is Victor Arocho signing off with my co-author and mentor, Steve Running. And we're looking forward to talking to our next podcast.
Sounds great. Everybody have a great night.